Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to this morning's hearing on the United States Fire Administration. There are few issues more important than standing up for our nation's first responders. The Science and Technology Committee has historically been one of the fire service community's strongest backers through our support for and oversight of the United States Fire Administration. I'm eager to hear today's testimony from our prestigious group of witnesses who represent a broad group of stakeholders in the fire service community. USFA was formed by Congress in 1974 in response to America Burning, a report by the President's Commission on Fire Safety that found there were over 12,000 deaths due to fire in this country and over 300,000 fire injuries every single year. Through the hard work of USFA and others, we have fortunately seen that number drop dramatically. We are now a much safer nation thanks to improved awareness of fire safety practices and increased use of smoke detectors and sprinklers and other fire safety measures. Still, however, approximately 3,000 people die each year in fires and 10,000 more are injured. In addition, approximately 100 firefighters lose their lives annually in the line of duty, as we saw tragically this past June in South Carolina. Looking around the globe, though, our high numbers are an anomaly in the industrialized world. In Europe, their fatality rate is 70% lower than ours. So truly, we have more work to do. USFA supports local fire departments in a variety of manners. They offer training and career development to thousands of mid-level firefighters, fire chiefs, and other emergency management officials. Through the National Fire Data Center, collect and manage data on the millions of fires and other emergencies that fire departments respond to each year, data that can be used to manage trends and set policy. USFA develops fire education and awareness curriculum used across the country. They aim these messages at groups who suffer the highest fire casualties, such as the young, the elderly, firefighters, as well as others. In fact, my home state of Oregon was one of the first states to begin reporting fire data to USFA and also one of the highest users of USFA training programs. Certainly there are Oregonians who can contribute their own life or the life of a loved one to the USFA. Lastly, in partnership with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate, other federal agencies, and private organizations, USFA conducts and directs research on a variety of fire-related topics, from technology like thermal imaging cameras and protective clothing to assist firefighters in the line of duty to studies of behaviors that cause fires. As I'm sure we will hear today, USFA's programs are incredibly important to the nation's fire service, who must meet an increasing number of challenges, from preparedness for terrorist attacks and catastrophic hurricanes to the everyday but still scary house fire. Standards are also an essential part of the work of USFA and its many partners. Our witnesses today will no doubt discuss USFA's role in the fire safety standards development process, as well as the important contributions of NIST. As many of you know, fire was the inspiration for some of the original standards done by NIST. In 1904, a large fire broke out in Baltimore. Fire companies from around the region responded, but they found that they were unable to fit their hoses onto the Baltimore hydrants because they were not built to standard sizes, and the fire burned for an additional 30 hours in spite of the regional response. Following the fire, NIST, which is then called the National Bureau of Standards, was asked by Congress to work with NFPA to set a standard that would avert similar future tragedies. To me, this story exemplifies the challenge in coordinating a truly local service performed by over 30,000 different fire departments at the federal level. These 30,000 different departments serve a variety of communities, largest to the smallest, and an overwhelming number of those who serve as firefighters do so on a volunteer basis. One asset the federal government can offer these departments is the U.S. Fire Administration. As we look forward to reauthorizing the Fire Administration, I'm very interested to hear from our witnesses today, who I believe represent a broad collection of the fire community, what USFA is doing right, and what they need to be doing to the fire community more effectively. And now for his opening statement, our ranking member of the subcommittee, Dr. Gingrey of Georgia.
Thank you, Chairman Wu, and good morning. And I want to thank you for holding the hearing today that will begin the process of reauthorizing the United States Fire Administration. The stated mission of USFA is to reduce life and economic losses due to fire and related emergencies through leadership, advocacy, coordination, and support. This organization provides vital assurance in the areas of training, fire education, and awareness, and grants to a number of local fire departments across the country, including my district, these very, very important grants. The testimony that our witnesses will provide this morning will help better shape the future priorities of the USFA as we work on the agency's reauthorization, and certainly I look forward to hearing from them on this important matter. USFA's training, education, and monitoring activities have made a substantial impact over the last 30 years. Smoke alarms are now standard issue in residences across the country. I wish they were all wired instead of battery operated, but we continue to work on that. Over 1 million firefighters have received advanced training from USFA, and firefighter equipment and safety continually improves. However, while USFA should be proud of its record of achievement, it's also clear that improvements still need to be made. In the last 10 years, deaths related to fires have decreased by approximately 25%, from nearly 5,000 in 1996 to 3,675 in 2006. Although that decrease in fire-related deaths is commendable, the United States still has one of the highest death rates from fire in the industrialized world. It's hard to believe. Additionally, despite decreases in the number of fires, direct damage costs are increasing and have topped $10 billion per year. Put that another way, in an average year, fire causes as much damage in the United States as do hurricanes. These statistics highlight the importance of the USFA, United States Fire Administration, and why we are here today. USFA has a substantial public safety mission whose magnitude is not often recognized. Therefore, as the committee begins drafting legislation that will provide a framework for USFA in the coming years, I look forward to this panel of witnesses to sketch out where the needs are the greatest, what programs have been successful to this date, and maybe where currently we could be a little bit off course. Before I finish, though, let me bring up one particular area of concern for me. Several of our witnesses, I think, will discuss potentially updating the National Fire Incident Reporting System. I think that's referred to as NFIRS. And I want to urge a little caution and diligence in approaching the upgrade. IT projects like this one, we're often, even on this committee, and Chairman Gordon has a bill pertaining to IT in regard to health information technology, electronic medical records. But IT projects can rapidly fall apart, potentially leaving USFA with some very unhappy users and ballooning infrastructure costs. So the USFA and the fire community, I think, need to be very specific about the goals and the limitations of creating a new system. Will web-based reporting bring in better quality data or provide tangible benefits over the current system? That's the big question. And how will the upgraded system meet the needs of local, state, and USFA personnel? These are just a couple of questions that need to be addressed as we begin the process of reauthorizing USFA, and I look forward to hearing the testimony of all of our witnesses today. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for convening the hearing to address the future of USFA, and I yield back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gingrey. At this point, I would like to introduce our witnesses today. First, the United States Fire Administrator Gregory Cade of the USFA. Before taking this position, he was the Fire Chief and Emergency Services Coordinator for the City of Virginia Beach. Dr. Shyam Sunder is the Director of the Building and Fire Research Laboratory at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Chief Stephen Westermann is the President and Chief Fire Officer for the International Association of Fire Chiefs and the Fire Chief of Central Jackson County Fire Protection District in Kansas. An old friend, Captain Robert Livingston, is the Legislative Director of the Oregon State Council of Firefighters of the International Association of Firefighters and is also captain in the Salem, Oregon Fire Department. Chief Gordon Henderson, I will let Dr. Gingrey introduce in a moment, and Dr. John Hall is the Assistant Vice President for Fire Analysis and Research for the National Fire Protection Association, and I yield to Dr. Gingrey to further introduce Chief Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for that courtesy of allowing me to introduce Chief Gordon Henderson from Floyd County, Georgia, my district, the 11th District of Georgia, Northwest Georgia, the greatest part of the state. Chief Henderson has served in the fire service for 32 years. He spent the last 16 as Deputy Chief of Operations for the Rome-Floyd County Fire Department. Chief Henderson is also past president of the Georgia State Firefighters Association, and he currently serves as the chairperson of the Georgia Fire Service Legislative Committee. That's an important one. He is appearing before us today on behalf of the National Volunteer Fire Council, and it's always nice to welcome a fellow Georgian to testify before the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, and know that you'll be able to provide us, Chief Henderson, with a unique and interesting perspective due to your years of service and leadership experience, and I certainly thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Reclaiming my time, as all of the witnesses know, your written testimony will be submitted in full, and your spoken testimony, please try to limit them to 5 minutes, after which the members of the committee will have 5 minutes each to ask questions, and if any other members have opening statements to submit, they will be submitted for the written record. And at this point, we will begin our testimony with Administrator Cade. Please proceed, Mr. Cade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say good morning to both you and all of the rest of the members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to speak on behalf of the United States Fire Administration and Secretary Chertoff. I appreciate what the committee is getting ready to do. I think the reauthorization of the United States Fire Administration is something critically important. As you pointed out in my biography, I have had the pleasure of being in the fire service now for 40 years, and the things that are done as part of the United States Fire Administration are extremely important. The USFA is truly a leader in providing fire safety and fire prevention programs. We don't do it by ourselves, and sitting here today with me is a distinguished panel of other people that we work with and partner with to get the things done that we need to do. There is no thing more important, in my opinion, than the education of the first responders and the first response community. My experience has been that the first responders truly are there when things start, and they are there when everybody else goes home. So making sure that they have the tools and the training and the education to be able to do their job, I see as a very critical issue. And I see that role of the United States Fire Administration as one that can help not only provide some of the training directly to that community, but also truly with our state partners and local partners to be able to provide it out at the local level. It's impossible for everyone to get up to the wonderful facility at the National Emergency Training Center, even though we get about 9,000 people through there a year. There are 1.2 million firefighters here in the United States that need that training. So clearly we have to partner with many of the organizations that sit here at this table today to be able to get our job done. I think that there is a critical need for the fire service to continue to take the role in leading how to provide incident command training that meets the National Incident Management System. There is no one, in my opinion, who uses the ICS system on a daily basis more effectively than the fire service. And hopefully what we're going to be able to do with the United States Fire Administration is to help them to become a center of excellence in their local communities and take the knowledge that they have and provide that to everyone else. I know that when you look at the other issues that are facing the fire service, a critical issue that has come about certainly in the last few years, but probably something we've been working on for the last 10, is this whole issue of the national wildland-urban interface and the problems that it is creating for the communities. The USFA has been working very diligently with its partners, not only in the U.S. Fire Service, but also in the Bureau of Land Management, to try and figure out how do we do a better job of preparing first responders at the structural firefighting level that are continuing more and more to be engaged in doing wildland firefighting. So we are working with those other partners. It's important for me to be sitting here today, the week before the National Fire Prevention Week starts, and I'm glad that you chose today to conduct the hearing, because next week we're going to put an even greater focus and hopefully get our whole country to focus on fire prevention and fire prevention activities, changing the batteries in their smoke detectors, and I too wish they were all wired together, and would certainly make a significant difference. I agree that the numbers of fire deaths and fire injuries here in the United States is something that we continue to need to work on and do a much better job. And our commitment within the United States Fire Administration is to look at using the data collection capabilities that we have to put the facts out there to help guide the research that is being done, and with our partners to look at where are the better ways to be able to safeguard not only the communities, but certainly safeguard the firefighters. Unfortunately, so far this year, we are at 96 line-of-duty deaths. That really concerns me. I'm afraid before this year is out, we'll be over 120. I've spoken out about it numerous times, and I'm going to continue to speak out about it. I think that there is a role that needs to be continued to be pushed from the United States Fire Administration standpoint in the use of residential sprinklers as a way of hopefully being able to address the next level of injuries and deaths that are taking place. I think that putting a greater emphasis on residential sprinkler systems will not only do a better job of suppressing the fires, but I think it will help to deal with the $10 billion a year loss, and even more importantly with the loss of lives that we are seeing not only in the community but also with our firefighters. So it is important, I think, to be able to do that, is to look at how do we collect that data. We are looking at trying to make some modifications in our data collection capability and go to a web-based program. One of the dilemmas that we have right now is the way the system is structured. In some cases, we're not getting the data out of the state till 12, 18 months. When I went through my confirmation hearing, and I've said this before, some of the questions that I had that I wanted data to be able to use, I couldn't get 2006 statistics, which I thought was pretty amazing. When you can go on the internet today and Google something and find out tons of information, to me, for a fire chief sitting at his or her desk, ought to have that same capability to look at using the data. There is no one else in the world who has better fire statistics and more of it than the United States Fire Administration and the National Fire Data Center. We have over 21,000 fire departments that are continuing to provide information to us across this country. We're looking at expanding it. We have a program right now where we have been working not only with the Department of Defense but also with our tribal partners to see about how we can do a better job of correlating the data for them and be able to use that. We have a lot of relationships, and you will hear that, I'm sure, from the other people that are going to speak behind me about the good things that are going on and the needs that we have across this fire service. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will be happy to answer whatever questions that you have.
Thank you. We will do questions all together at the end of all the witness testimony. And next, Dr. Sunder, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Vu and Dr. Gingrey and members of the subcommittee. NIST fire research is focused on reducing losses and risk by advancing innovative fire protection technologies and increasing the safety of buildings that are threatened by fire. And we do that by improving building and fire code standards and practices. Our work is aimed at filling research gaps in areas such as how the fire-related characteristics of modern furnishings, building materials, and designs affect the time available for safely exiting buildings, particularly in high-rise buildings and for impaired populations, including those in hospitals, nursing homes, residences, or other facilities. Our research provides the science, performance measures, and tools critical to developing and implementing new and emerging technologies that will improve the effectiveness and safety of firefighters. We go beyond developing tools and methods by actually getting our results into the hands of firefighters, incident commanders, and other emergency responders. In addition, NIST is working on science-based approaches for limiting fire growth and spread, particularly in residential settings where the vast majority of fire deaths occur, by reducing the flammability of the materials and products within our homes, by reliably detecting a fire in its nascent state, and by automatically suppressing fires once they develop. As part of the President's American Competitiveness Initiative, or ACI, we're developing tools for reducing community losses from fires at the wildland-urban interface. These tools will assist communities all across the U.S. in assessing their risk to such fires and choosing economically balanced mitigation strategies. Also, as part of the ACI, NIST has begun examining fire safety issues associated with the emerging use of hydrogen as a fuel in transportation and in domestic and commercial power generation. NIST will provide the scientific and technical information to support the development of codes and standards for the design of engineered containment and transport systems and for mitigating potential fire and explosion hazards in both the residential and commercial sectors. Finally, NIST's Fire Research Grant Program has been the primary federal source for fire research at U.S. universities for the past 30 years, and a source for training the next generation of fire protection engineers and researchers. Our fire research priorities are determined in a deliberate and inclusive fashion. We work with a broad range of industries, codes and standards developing organizations, fire service organizations, professional societies, public safety groups, universities, and other government agencies. We identify the needs of these customers and the capabilities of our research collaborators both here and abroad through workshops, direct contact at technical meetings, roadmaps, and established national priorities. Our fire research program evolves from these needs after considering the potential impact and probability of success, the fit to our mission, match of the technical challenges to the staff capabilities, and the potential for leveraging the investment. There are many examples of how our research program is coordinated with the U.S. Fire Administration. We regularly hold joint workshops with USFA that includes representatives from the fire service, industry, and other laboratories to establish priorities for fire service research. The results of these workshops have helped set the current research agenda for both NIST and USFA. Our research plans are coordinated through an established liaison arrangement where, in fact, a NIST employee spends about a day a week at USFA. Together, we jointly fund high-priority research topics, transfer research results to the fire service, and conduct investigations of firefighter fatalities. Recent research projects include characterizing the performance of personal protective equipment, developing structural collapse prediction technology, and assembling the components of a virtual firefighter trainer for next-generation firefighting. We are also working together to analyze the recent Charleston furniture store fire that resulted in 9 firefighter fatalities. Our research results are transferred to the fire service via training courses at the National Fire Academy. We produce an electronic newsletter for fire service personnel called fire.gov, and electronic publications distributed directly to fire departments and training academies. Our research has been used to develop entire courses or has been integrated into course modules of the Fire Academy. We also continue to work closely with standards development organizations. Our research has provided the technical basis for new NFPA standard for the Personal Alert Safety System, or pass device that is used by firefighters. In a similar fashion, our research has provided the technical basis for the development of a new NFPA standard for the effective use of thermal imagers for tracking fire spread and locating fallen firefighters and building occupants. In summary, we are proud of our role as a partner and science and technology resource for USFA, helping to play a significant role in the development of science-based consensus standards in reliable, safe, and effective firefighting equipment and techniques in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunder. Chief Westerman.
Good morning, Chairman Rue, Ranking Member Gingrey, and members of the committee. As Chief of the Central Jackson County Fire District in Missouri and President of the nearly 13,000 members of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, it is a true honor to be here as we begin the process of reauthorization and to discuss the USFA and the priorities of the nation's fire service. The USFA plays a major role in preparing the fire service for all hazards. The mission of the USFA is to reduce life and economic loss to fire and related emergencies through leadership, coordination, and support. The major focus of the USFA's activities is the National Fire Academy. In fiscal year FY07, the NFA trained over 8,000 fire and emergency service officers on campus and over 76,000 off campus in distance learning to respond to regional and national incidents involving all hazards. USFA also plays important roles in educating the public about fire safety and prevention, collecting, analyzing, and disseminating fire information, and partnering with the public and private sector to conduct research on new fire-related technologies. In FY07, Congress appropriated $46.8 million for the USFA, an increase of $2.3 million above FY06 level. Both the House and Senate have passed appropriation bills containing $43.3 million for the USFA in FY08. Congress authorized $68.8 million for the USFA in FY08. We urge the committee to reauthorize the USFA in 09 as $70 million with a 5-year authorization to ensure long-term funding stability for the agency. The National Fire Incident Reporting System, known as NFIRS, is an essential tool for America's fire service. The NFIRS is the world's largest national annual database for fire and emergency incident information. Over 21,000 fire departments report to the NFIRS each year. These departments report an average of 14 million incidents and 1 million fires each year. The NFIRS is designed to receive data pertaining to all incidents in order to cover the full range of fire department activities. Unfortunately, the NFIRS is not being utilized to its fullest potential. The current format requires fire departments to submit data on paper or as computer files to the states, which then periodically upload the data to the USFA. Under the current system, there can be a delay of 12 to 18 months in compiling national data. In addition, NFIRS only includes about half of the reported fires that occur annually, and this simply is not acceptable. Therefore, the IAFC would like Congress to authorize $3 million over 3 years for the USFA to enhance NFIRS data collection system and to transform it into a real-time web reporting tool. While we do not expect overnight fire data analysis, the collection of more and timelier data may help to reduce the current 12 to 18 month delay and may make it easier to distinguish major trends. For example, earlier this year, there were a number of fires that caused multiple fatalities in New York and the Midwest. Without timely data from NFIRS, it was difficult to ascertain whether these deaths were a record number, a growing trend, or simply an anomaly receiving heightened media attention. The Senate appropriated $1 million to modernize NFIRS in H.R. 2638, the FY08 Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. We hope that Congress will pass this appropriation and authorize it in the USFA Reauthorization Bill. USFA brings the perspective of the frontline firefighter to policy discussions. As the DHS develops federal policies such as the new National Response Framework, USFA should continue to be involved to ensure that these policies are practicable for the local first responders during an emergency, terrorist attack, or disaster. The IAFC urges the committee to support the USFA's current seat at the National Operations Center. Operating 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, the NOC serves as the nation's nerve center for information sharing and domestic incident management. The USFA can play a critical role in the NOC by obtaining information from fire departments around the country for fusion with other potential threat information. In addition, the USFA can rely on information on a possible threat to a local fire department. For example, if there was a threat of a chlorine bomb in the Kansas City area, The NOC would inform me of the threat so that the hazmat teams in the Kansas City area would be on heightened alert status. The IAFC also supports the USFA's current plan to educate the public about the life-saving benefits of residential fire sprinklers. Currently, only about 2% of the American homes have fire sprinklers. However, fire sprinklers can play a major role in saving lives and preventing property damage. According to the National Fire Protection Association, when sprinklers are present in structures, the fire death rate per 1,000 reported structure fires is lower by at least 57%, and the rate of property damage per reported structure fire is lower by 1 to 2/3. The installation of more fire sprinklers in homes should reduce both civilian and firefighters' deaths, as well as reduce property damage. A growing challenge for the fire service is the growth of wildland-urban interface. As residential growth expands into traditionally rural areas, there is an increase in the amount of property damage that has occurred from fires. The annual estimated cost for combating wildland fires exceeds $500 million for local governments and $2 billion for state and federal agencies, a large portion of which is in the wildland interface. Insurance companies spend over $250 million per year covering the damage caused by interface fires. Many fire departments, especially those not in the West, are just beginning to recognize the challenges of fighting fires in the WUI. By working more closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of the Interior, the USFA can become a leading agency in educating traditionally structural fire departments about how to safely and effectively respond to fires in the interface and help educate the public about fire prevention and mitigation in the interface. I know I'm out of time, but there's one more critical area that we do need to discuss, and that is EMS. EMS is an important part of the U.S. Fire Service. According to the USFA's 4 years later, a second needs assessment, 67% of the responding fire departments provide EMS. And of all the major metropolitan areas, 100% of those departments provide EMS. USFA should educate the DHS leadership, other federal agencies, and the public about the role of fire-based EMS in their areas. And with that, we thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee, and on behalf of the America's Fire and EMS Chiefs, we look forward to working with you in the reauthorization of the USFA.
Thank you very much, Chief Westerman. Captain Livingston, please proceed.
Chairman Wu, Ranking Member Gingrey, and members of the committee. My name is Bob Livingston. I'm a captain in the Salem, Oregon Fire Department and a proud member of the International Association of Firefighters. I am pleased to appear today on behalf of IAFF General President Harold Schaetberger and the more than 250,000 full-time emergency response personnel who comprise our organization. Whether responding to everyday emergencies or major disasters, America's professional firefighters and emergency medical personnel are on the front lines every day working tirelessly to save lives and protect public safety. Today's professional firefighter is an all-purpose emergency responder, highly trained in such specialized disciplines as emergency medical care, hazardous and WMD materials response, and technical rescue. It is from this perspective, as America's frontline domestic defenders, that we view the mission and programs of the United States Fire Administration. As the role of the firefighters has expanded to meet the needs of their communities, so too must the role of the USFA evolve to meet the needs of the 21st century fire service. The USFA of the 21st century must evolve to fully embrace and support the fire service's role in emergency medical, hazmat, and WMD response. Pre-hospital 911 emergency response has become a principal duty of the fire service, such that today's fire service provides first medical response to virtually every community in America. Similarly, the growing number and dangerous nature of incidents involving hazardous materials has elevated the importance of hazmat training and preparedness within the fire service. USFA must fully integrate EMS and hazmat WMD training and preparedness into its missions and programs. While confident that USFA appreciates the importance of expanding its work in these arenas, we remain concerned that these efforts are not widely recognized. Within the federal government, for example, dozens of federal agencies administer programs and provide funding that impacts the fire service. Yet too often, these agencies have little knowledge about who we are and what we do. USFA should therefore bolster its efforts to educate others, including within the federal government, about the duties of the modern fire service, especially the crucial role firefighters play in providing emergency medical services, hazmat, and WMD preparedness. USFA has successfully furthered the professional development of the fire service through the Fire Academy. To expand the Academy's reach, USFA should expand its remote training and education programs. Federally funded training programs currently offered by the IAFF provide an excellent model for the sort of delivery system USFA could utilize towards this end. By partnering with entities that have effective local delivery systems, such as the IAFF, USFA could offer academy courses to those for whom traveling to Emmitsburg is impractical. In addition to enhancing its many ongoing worthwhile projects, we believe there is one significant new initiative that USFA should undertake. Since its inception, USFA has helped reduce both the number of fires as well as the number of civilian deaths from fire. Unfortunately, far less progress has been made reducing line-of-duty deaths among firefighters. While it will never be possible to eliminate line-of-duty deaths, we must commit to significantly reducing the number of firefighter fatalities. We understand much of what must be done to protect firefighters: adequate training and equipment, using safe operating procedures and staffing levels, and ensuring the physical and mental health of firefighters. Yet, despite the advocacy of USFA and nonprofit organizations, the fire service has been slow to adopt practices that would save lives. Although some departments have embraced safe practices and procedures, the traditional approach to institute change within the fire service from the bottom up has largely failed. In my hometown of Salem, Oregon, for example, communications between police and fire personnel via portable radio are currently impossible. While Salem is working expeditiously to implement a plan to overcome its communications challenges, many communities have yet to address the need for public safety interoperability. It doesn't have to be this way. The time has come for the federal government to take a bold and proactive role to reduce the number of firefighter fatalities through the adoption of national standards for safe firefighter operations, training, staffing, and fitness. We needn't recreate the wheel. The National Fire Protection Association has developed widely respected fire safety codes and standards using an open, consensus-based development process. Similarly, Project 25 provides for common system standards to achieve interoperability. USFA should make it part of its core mission to ensure every fire department in America complies with national fire safety standards, and we should use the programs and resources of the federal government to help achieve this goal. In closing, on behalf of the IAFF, I appreciate the opportunity to testify on the future of the U.S. Fire Administration. As you continue working to reauthorize USFA, we urge you to consider enhancing its programs and services to meet the needs of the modern fire service, including an increased emphasis on EMS, hazmat, WMD response. Furthermore, we hope the committee will give serious consideration to novel ways by which USFA may help reduce the number of firefighter deaths, including advocating for the adoption of and compliance with national standards for safe firefighting. I thank the committee and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Captain Livingston. Chief Henderson, please proceed.
Got to mash my button. Sorry about that. Chairman Wu, Dr. Gingrey, and members of the subcommittee. National Volunteer Fire Council appreciate the opportunity to be here today to express our views and experiences regarding the United States Fire Administration and the National Fire Academy. As Dr. Gingrey mentioned earlier, I'm a past president of the Georgia Firefighters Association, and the Georgia State Firefighters Association is a member of the National Volunteer Fire Council, which represents the interests of the nation's approximately 1 million volunteer firefighters and emergency medical personnel who staff more than 30,000 fire and EMS agencies nationwide. Over the years, the roles associated with the fire and emergency services have greatly expanded. Gone are the days when our primary responsibilities were putting wet stuff on the red stuff to make black stuff, in other words, putting out fires, or transporting patients to the hospital. Fire and emergency services personnel have routinely deal with hazardous materials, provide emergency medical care, and perform search and rescue in a wide range of situations. We're the first responders to dumpster fires, automobile accidents, structure fires, wildland fires, medical emergencies, natural disasters, and yes, even terrorist attacks and much more.
The USFA and the NFA play a critical role in educating and training fire, rescue, and emergency personnel throughout the United States. As the fire and emergency services have been asked to do, and the USFA has expanded its course offerings, the USFA currently offers courses in arson, communications, critical infrastructure protection, emergency medical services and rescue, fire prevention and planning, fire service administration, firefighter health and safety, hazardous materials, incident management, operations and tactics, professional development, terrorism, wildfire, and youth juvenile firefighter intervention. In recognition of the wide range of activities that the fire and emergency services perform, as well as the extensive courses offerings that the USFA already provides, the National Volunteer Fire Council is pleased to see that the draft reauthorizing language would expand the types of activities that the USFA is explicitly authorized to train fire service personnel in, to include dealing with fires occurring in the wildland-urban interface, incident involving hazardous materials, and advanced EMS. These are each core aspects of the Fire and Emergency Service Division and deserve the recognition as such. With today's requirements for the emergency personnel to perform such a wide range of duties, they are also required to spend more time training. For volunteers who work a full-time job and train on nights and weekends, increases in training times are particularly burdensome. The most visible and direct benefit from the USFA that the USFA provides to the volunteer fire service is the hosting of the volunteer incentive program at the National Fire Academy, which combines 2 weeks worth of coursework into an intensive 6-day session. The compressed course schedule is essential for many volunteers who cannot take 2 weeks off to attend classes, and the course topics are geared specifically toward addressing challenges faced in many volunteer agencies. I've listed those in the testimony. I won't read those in of time. In addition to the training provided on site, the NFA and the USFA delivers training directly to local jurisdictions, either through online tutorial or by providing states with NFA developed training and educational materials to make available to local emergency responders. This allows USFA to reach a greater number of firefighters at a relatively low cost. The National Volunteer Fire Council is pleased to see that the draft authorizing language would specifically allow USFA to implement a train-the-trainer program which goes beyond simply training first responders but teaches them to deliver the training to others. The USFA collects, analyzes, and disseminates data and information on fires and other emergency incidents to stakeholders and members of the public. Using this information, decision makers can make better informed decisions on policies and strategies to pursue, with the end result being reduced fire-related loss of life and property. One of the data collection programs maintained by the USFA is the National Fire Incident Reporting System, NIFRS. This is the standard national reporting system used by U.S. fire departments to report information on fires and other incidents to which they respond. NIFRS is supposed to allow the USFA to maintain records of incidents in a uniform manner and develop statistics from that data. While NIFRS is useful in its current capacity, it needs to be updated so that reporting can be done online as well as in written form. Currently, data is reported using NIFRS software can take more than a year to reach the USFA, if it reaches it at all. Some fire departments purchase their own software to keep track of track of and record incident data to the USFA rather than using NIFRs. USFA should develop a web-based reporting system that will allow information to flow more quickly to the states and to the USFA. The National Volunteer Fire Council is pleased that the authorizing bill addresses this issue. National Volunteer Fire Council would also like to see the authorizing bill establish some type of link between NIFRs and the National Emergency Medical Services Information System, which is maintained by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. To collect data about incidents that occur during EMS responses. Because the fire service handles so many EMS calls, the National Volunteer Fire Council believes that the USFA and NTSA should cooperate to make sure that their respective systems are capturing data that is as accurate and useful as possible. In closing, the National Volunteer Fire Council respectfully requests that the USFA be reauthorized and that funding be placed at a level that will allow the USFA to continue to improve and increase the programs offered to the fire service and other emergency services. We support the funding levels specified in the draft authorizing language and hope that they will not only be passed into law, but fully funded in future appropriations legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Dr. Hall, please proceed.
Chairman Wu, Dr. Gingrey, and other subcommittee members of the National Fire Protection Association and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you in support of reauthorization of the U.S. Fire Administration. The USFA has funded and conducted over the years defining research projects on the full range of fire prevention and mitigation technologies. They have also partnered on research to improve the technologies that first responders use to do their job safely and effectively. For example, the USFA has worked closely with NIST on computer analysis of fires where firefighters die, leading to new training tools and changes in firefighting tactics and procedures. NFPA is America's principal source for national voluntary consensus codes and standards related to both fire safety and the fire service. Our standards use a true consensus approach with a balance of interest to address a broad range of topics such as professional qualifications and performance, testing, maintenance, and operation standards for protective and firefighting equipment. Over 400 federal government staff, including USFA and NIST, participate in the NFPA standards development process, and our documents have benefited greatly from USFA and NIST expertise. NFPA agrees with the legislation that development and enhancement of a national voluntary consensus standards, unquote, is important to the USFA mission. We welcome this recognition of the importance of standards in translating the latest scientific research into practice. NFPA conducts some research itself, but we established the Fire Protection Research Foundation as an independent entity to partner funders with researchers on projects relevant to our mission. NIST has provided researchers and the USFA has provided funding for research foundation projects. Research has brought us closer to understanding some of the technical controversies surrounding home smoke alarms, fire sprinklers, sensors for detection of incipient fire conditions, innovative high-performance materials, and the list goes on and on. But despite these controversies, decisions must still be made. At any given time, best judgments must be used when definitive technical answers might be no more than one well-designed project away. Best practices must be based on existing technology because promising new technologies lack independent testing and evaluation. In 2006, the USFA and NFPA partnered on a second fire service needs assessment, and it found improvement on some measures of aggregate national need. For example, the percentage of departments with portable radios to equip everyone on a shift rose from 23% to 36%. The percentage of departments with self-contained breathing apparatus for all emergency responders rose from 30% to 40%. The percentage of departments with personal alert safety system devices for all emergency emergency responders on a shift rose from 38% to 52%, and the percentage of departments with written agreements to coordinate use of outside personnel and equipment rose from 19% to 26% for a building collapse and from 21% to 30% for a biological chemical agent scenario. Some were surprised that the improvements were not more dramatic and did not extend to more types of resources. We were not, because we knew that a grant program funded at about $500 million a year could not expect to rapidly transform a set of fire service needs collectively estimated to cost many tens of billions of dollars. We suggest that Congress use our needs assessment as a tool for priority setting. In my real job back home, I'm the head of the group that produces and analyzes fire statistics, so the one database that is most important to make my work at NFPA more effective and planning for the USFA more strategic is NFIRS. For 3 decades, NFIRS has been essential in defining our national fire problem. Despite its great value, NFIRS has been subject to criticism this year on timeliness. I believe web-based reporting can be a valuable enhancement, but we need to understand what it can and cannot do. NFIRS is a sample of fires reported to fire departments. Valid analysis depends on use of a representative sample of sufficient size. Currently, the full NFIRS sample is large enough that representativeness is usually not a problem. However, if data were analyzed year to date, there would be less data and less representative data because of differences in speed of reporting by community size and region. Also, NFIRS quality depends on editing at the local, state, and national levels. Requiring web-based real-time reporting could discourage or eliminate some or all of this editing. I urge the subcommittee to give the USFA professionals the funding to expand the system, but also the flexibility to fill in the details. I think I speak not only for NFPA, but for all the fire safety community in saying we need a strong USFA. A USFA that does the things it does better than anyone else and makes it easy for everyone else to do what they do best. We agree that the reauthorization bill should reinforce the range of technologies that are appropriate to the USFA mission, but resist the temptation to direct the allocation of resources among these technologies. We trust the new leader of the USFA, Chief Gregory Cade, and the USFA professionals to make the best choices. And on that basis, the NFPA strongly and enthusiastically supports the reauthorization of the U.S. Fire Administration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. And now we will turn to member questions, and the chairman recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Several of the representatives of fire services in a written or oral testimony referred to that the USFA does not have sufficient resources to fully meet the needs of the local fire service communities. And Chief Westerman, I believe you referred to that specifically in your oral testimony. In your opinions, what are the financial and other costs to local governments, to the fire departments, private citizens, and businesses as a result of this underinvestment in the USFA? And if we may, we could start with Chief Westerman and move to my right, your left, and then we'll finish up with Administrator Cade.
I think it's just an expansion of a lot of the current programs that are there, beginning with the Fire Academy. We have 8,000 people that have been on campus, only 76,000 through off-site distance learning, but we have 1.2 million firefighters in the country. So there's a lot of firefighters that are still not receiving some of the benefits of those programs. Probably the other respect to an expansion of programs is the education of our public to reduce the fire and not only the fire losses and life losses, particularly in residential sprinklers, the smoke detectors, things of that nature. So it's just an expansion, I think, of a lot of the current programs.
Captain Livingston.
Mr. Chair, committee members, while I can't quantify a dollar number for you on the cost and where we are with respect to the programs, certainly, clearly in my testimony and in others, we need to make some improvements, particularly respect to firefighter fatalities and make sure that we do a good job of not only educating about safe operations, but clearly we strongly feel that it is time to have some national standards, not only provide for some streamlining of the fire service, but also if you are going to collect data with respect to NFIRS, one of those components, and I think that Dr. Hall mentioned it, is that I was shocked and surprised to hear some of the numbers that with radios, I think we went from 21% up to 36%. To me, that tells me that there's 64% of the firefighters out there that still don't have mobile radios available for them to use. So while I appreciate the efforts, and certainly this is an important topic, the USFA has done a great job. We live in a new world now in the 21st century, and so I think we need to make some strides in some of these areas. I think the USFA can be the sounding board for the fire service, not only in the federal government, but at the local level as well.
Thank you, Captain Livingston. Chief Henderson.
I don't think I can put a dollar.
Your microphone on there?
Sorry. Must have been on to start with and cut it off. In the state of Georgia, we use handoff courses from the National Fire Academy that go out to a lot of local firefighters. And I think those handoff courses are very valuable, and I think they need to continue. I think they need to be increased. We have also started in the state of Georgia going through the VOTEC schools to put out part of the training. That also needs to be increased. And when you look at those for the training to go out to the people, it would make it easier for the volunteers to come into their local communities to get training. And also with the again, I would echo what everybody else has said about sprinklers and residential sprinklers now. Cobb County and Marietta, where Dr. Gingrey is from, actually have a residential sprinkler ordinance. And I think it has saved a lot of lives in Cobb County and Marietta. And it's something that I think is needed nationwide. A dollar amount, I'd have no idea what it would be, but I would say it'd be extensive to the states.
Thank you very much, Chief. And Administrator Cade, and then if either Dr. Sunder or Dr. Hall have anything to add to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly within the United States Fire Administration, what we believe right now is that we are currently funded for the mission that we're expected to accomplish. And obviously, if Congress decides to increase the mission for the United States Fire Administration, then hopefully there will be some additional funding that would go along with that increase in the mission. I think what you've heard certainly from some of the individuals is the hunger for education and training at the local level, and that is something that I look at as that not only the head of the United States Fire Administration, but also as a fire chief, of trying to figure out how do you provide the best possible training at the local level, which is truly where it needs to be. And the United States Fire Administration has been trying and working very diligently with our state training directors at figuring out how do we push out the training to the local level. It would be nice to say that all of the firefighters are going to have an opportunity to come through the National Fire Academy. That's just not realistic. So we need to figure out better ways of continuing to use distance learning capabilities to push out those classes. We are making some modifications in the training classes that we provide. We're pilot testing some of them right now to go from a 2-week training program down to a 6-week training program, so there would be some upfront work done before the individual came there. Time is something that none of us can increase, unfortunately, so we're trying to make sure that the offerings that we provide through the United States Fire Administration acknowledge that time is critical for individuals, whether they're studying at home or studying at the Fire Academy. So we certainly are trying to make some things and make it more cost-effective to be able to use. We have just moved back, obviously, back in once again to FEMA, and part of that is to look at how, as we fit in there, all of the other programs that are being done across FEMA to look for the operational efficiencies and streamlining that process. So hopefully, as we do that, we can redirect some of the resources that we have back into other programs.
Thank you, Mr. Cade. My time has expired, but if Dr. Sunder or Dr. Hall have anything to add. Dr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the beginning of my remarks, I mentioned that the Fire Administration over the years has funded a number of research projects on fire prevention and mitigation, as well as on the safety and effectiveness of the fire service. So the question you posed, I think, is a question of how much loss are we sustaining because we didn't do more of what they've always done well. This means we've had fires we didn't need to have. We've had fires that were more serious than they needed to be. We've paid more for fire protection than we had to pay. We've had firefighters who showed up who were not able to stop fires as quickly as they would have been able to, and we've had firefighters who paid a serious price of death or injury because of a lack of equipment or training. Quantifying how much of that we could have done how quickly is better done on a case-by-case basis, but I will tell you that we estimate the total cost of fire, losses plus what we spend to try to not have more losses, at over $100 billion a year. And if you imagine, as I would imagine, that with research and an accelerated translation of research into practice, that we could make a serious inroad into that number, then you are talking about potentially tens of billions of dollars a year that you might be able to reduce for prices, a small fraction of that, in the form of well-designed research projects.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunder. Thank you very much, Dr. Hall.
I may just add just a couple of comments, because I think the issues on firefighter fatality and residential sprinklers are certainly worth noting. There is work currently underway on those issues, particularly with regard to the PASS device and positive pressure ventilation techniques and structural collapse prediction technologies and firefighter locator and training technologies. So all of those are being addressed. There's obviously more that could be done, and it's a valid point, I think, that we need to look at. With regard to residential sprinklers, we've just finished a cost-benefit analysis of residential sprinklers, and came out last month, and this is going to be widely disseminated, so folks will have, the building code community will have better information as they consider proposals to require residential sprinklers.
Thank you, Dr. Sunder. And with that, Dr. Gingrey, recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, let me thank all of our witnesses today, and this is very, very impressive. I think we've really got the experts here, both in the policy and at the ground level, and it's great to hear from all of you. Your written testimonies, of course, your complete testimonies are part of our permanent record, and I haven't read the full testimony of each and every one of you, but I intend to try to do that. Sometimes we'll have hearings when I don't really have much interest in reading the full text because of what the witnesses had to say, but what the witnesses have had to say today, Mr. Chairman, I fully intend to read it because this is very important. I want to ask one question. I think most of you know I'm a medical doctor, member of the United States House of Representatives, and so the question I want to ask is in regard to emergency medical response. All of us go to or by the scene of an accident or by the scene of a fire, and sometimes you see what I would say is a duplicative response. So obviously you need emergency medical personnel there. But what can we do to better coordinate so that people are not standing around. And you, and I want any one of the 6 of you to respond to this, or all of you. You've got so many responsibilities, as you pointed that out, in regard to hazmat and weapons of mass destruction and protecting structure, evacuating personnel, making sure the fire doesn't spread to adjoining buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If your people are tied up trying to do CPR and administer emergency medical services, and yet there are 3 ambulances at the scene as well, with people that are very well trained. Chief Westerman and Captain Livingston, maybe if the 2 of you can start, because you addressed that more in your oral testimony.
Thank you, sir. I guess to start with, we firmly believe, and I believe my colleague, Captain Livingston, will agree with this, we firmly believe in fire-based EMS. And that simply is because our stations are already spread out with a fire apparatus, and to put an ambulance with that engine or the ladder truck is simply logical sense for the distribution and to reduce the response times to the incident as low as possible. As far as the number of people responding to the calls, and it kind of depends on the call, but if an MVA or a motor vehicle accident is occurring, you should have an engine and an ambulance, at least one ambulance on the scene, depending on how many patients there are. Not only for patient care and extrication of that patient from the car, but you also have a hazmat incident. You also have a fire hazard where some of the other people will be checking into. And as the number of patients increases, there goes the number of ambulances needed on the scene. If we're talking about a heart attack or something of that nature, you still end up with an engine and an ambulance on many scenes. Med units or ambulances are busy. Our ambulances in my organization are on the road almost 24 hours a day. The engine also has paramedics, EMTs on them across the country, and they are being used, again, in order to reduce the response time. Get the engine responding, the patient still gets the premium care that's possible, and at that point, once the engine or the ladder truck gets on the scene, paramedic is providing care, the ambulance, and I don't want to belittle their role, but essentially becomes the taxi cab. Patient's already getting care, the ambulance comes in from the other call or
that's my concern. I'm running out of time, and maybe I can address it in a second round because there's not as many people to ask questions. But that is my concern. I don't think the ambulance should be a taxi cab, a very expensive taxi cab. So again, Captain Livingston, if you want to comment in the few seconds I have left.
Very briefly, Chair Wu, Ranking Member Gingrey, just simply, we're in the life safety business, and it's a great fit for us to be able to provide emergency medical care in the pre-hospital setting. As a paramedic myself, I can tell you, and I'll echo some of the same comments that Chief Westerman is, our first and foremost priority and what we're there for is to protect the public safety, and life safety is important. Your illustration of a motor vehicle accident, not only can we start to do initial stabilization of the patient, if we need to, particularly in my organization and many throughout the fire service, we have advanced life support capability. And as you know, airway management and all those things are very important. At the same time, that engine not only provides advanced life support, it also provides for a safer scene with respect to if there's a car fire involved, hazardous materials. And so it's a great fit from the standpoint of having the fire service be involved in EMS and partnering with the then ambulance transport. Certainly, we believe fire-based transport is the way to streamline things.
Thank you, Chief and Captain. Mr. Chairman, I know my time has expired. I may come back to this in a second round.
We'll come back to you fairly shortly. Mr. Mitchell, you recognize 5 minutes.
Thank you. I don't really have a question, but kind of a response to Dr. Gingrey. In my area, in fact, every fire service in my district, the ambulance is contracted out. It's not part of the fire service. And therefore, there's not an ambulance at every station. There's an ambulance. In fact, what happens is the firefighters are the ones that are there fastest and the first responders. And the ambulance pretty much does, not as a taxi, but they don't necessarily all have paramedics on them as well. They have EMTs, but the fire service is the one that has all the paramedics. So they're the first responders. They're there first, and then the ambulance comes. And that way, it's been cheaper because there's not an ambulance at every station. They're spread out even much thinner and don't respond as fast. And that's just a comment. How it is in my particular district. I yield back my time. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And Dr. Gingrey, since you are the Republican on this side, and you seem to have some questions on this, we'll come back to you, and then we will go to Ms. Rich.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I think some of the other witnesses may want to comment on this too. But Mr. Mitchell, thank you for your comments. It's a lot like that, I think, in my district as well, and I haven't thought about this in a while, so this is certainly a very timely week coming up, and reauthorization and a timely hearing. Here again, I want to make sure that on the scene, that there is a protocol. If you, as Mr. Representative Mitchell pointed out, the firemen respond first. They get there first. But of course, in every community, the ambulance services who are contracted with the community, whether county, or city, or region, have to respond in a certain period of time, and pretty darn quickly, I might add. So when you get there, and let's say the fire department is there, and they're fighting that fire, but somebody with this great training that Captain Livingston talked about is trying to save a life, but all of a sudden then he looks around, and there's a paramedic in an ambulance service, and is there a handoff protocol where that firefighter, that paramedic on the ambulance, certainly is not going to be able to go in there and fight that fire. She's not trained to do that. Is there a protocol so that we don't waste our talent, so to speak, at the scene?
Both take it. I guess, and that's one of the niceties and the benefits of having fire-based EMS, in that both your ambulance personnel and the people fighting the fire are typically cross-trained in a fire department, so they could trade off and have distinct protocols on handoffs, such as what you mentioned.
And I would just say, Chair Wu, Ranking Member Gingrey, yes, there are protocols, particularly in the example that you give. That's one of the things, and I think it was Administrator Cade that mentioned it. Since we are so good at the incident management system, it's the overall incident commander that sets the goals and the priorities. And so in your illustration, once again, life safety is always the #1 priority for the fire service. But they would also go through the incident command system so that not only are we using those resources efficiently, but we're maximizing the effectiveness of them. And so we do that. While there may be differences, it's the incident command system, which we utilize on a day-to-day basis, that provides for that efficiency on that emergency scene.
Just comment, and then if others want to weigh in, you're there. You have that training. You're trying to offer life support to someone that you pull from the fire, but you may have 6 or 8 or 10, like in the South Carolina situation or other situations, where your brothers in arms and your firefighting partners are in there fighting a building, and of course their lives are at stake too. So it's a matter of trying to make sure, as I point out. Would others like to comment on that?
First, a couple of facts. There's something like 20 million emergency responses by fire departments each year, and only 7% of them are fires. Something like 60% or more are medical responses, and the percent as well as the numbers keep going up every year. The fire service needs assessment that I mentioned has a fairly recent reading on what fraction of fire departments offer EMS service, and other witnesses are correct that it's now the norm rather than the exception. and also information on what fraction of them have formal training for the people who are involved and what levels of certification they have, and it varies all over the place. But as Captain Livingston has said, it all comes down in the end to incident management. You've got to have a department which, as the center manager of the event, knowing the resources from other departments and its own that it has to put into place, has protocols in place to sequence the tasks and have things done in parallel and in sequence as appropriate. So I think most departments do that, and the trick is whether a group like the U.S. Fire Administration, through their training, can make sure that all departments do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my time is expiring, and Ms. Richardson has been very patient.
Thank you, Dr. Gingrey. And with that, the gentlelady from California, Ms. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Wu, for having this very helpful hearing that we have before us today. I'm going to start off first with a comment, and then I do have two questions. Number one, I was a little surprised in all the testimony today that there was very little reference to fire facilities. And I will tell you that in my hometown, almost every fire facility that I have been at, the fire stations themselves have been highly inadequate. First, in regard to gender abilities, you have fire situations where firefighters are forced to put a little bell on the door or some little sign that says there is a woman firefighter who's using the restroom or taking a shower. And clearly, we're going to have to deal with the inadequate facilities that we have. Second of all, I'd like to speak to the poor infrastructure. When you talk about crumbling bridges and so on, many of our fire facilities have only been able to survive due to the innovative abilities of our firefighters to really fix them and keep them up to speed. But I'm extremely concerned, for example, that in my area, the size of the bays, the bay doors, many of the new technology, the newer and larger size trucks, that the equipment is not able to get in, not able to get out. The location of the fire facilities in my area, we now have fire facilities that were originally put in there in the 40s and 50s. Now we're talking about very highly urban communities. So physically, to get out, to get onto these smaller streets and to get onto the main highways to be able to get to people and care for them is in high jeopardy. So I'd like to see, before we come forward with this reauthorization, of more information of what we're doing with the facilities specifically. What is your plan? What funding is going to be needed? And what funding are we talking about in this budget that's going to address those issues? My second point, Dr. Sunder, when we look at, I was watching the news this morning as I was getting ready for a 7:30 meeting, and they were talking about a fire that occurred here in D.C., and something to the effect of that the pipes didn't have enough water flow or whatever. So I would also like to see come back to this committee additional information of what we plan on doing to have adequate inspections of fire hydrants, pipes, etc. So we're not waiting until there's a fire and we find out we don't have adequate flow. That should be something that we know ahead of time, and we should have a proper priority set of how are we going to improve these various key infrastructure pieces, so when we have a crucial fire, we're going to be able to respond. And then my final point is a question to Captain Livingston, and I'm going to run to a Transportation Committee meeting, so that's why if the other two pieces of information could be supplied to this committee in writing. Captain Livingston, I think to the core, we can talk about the toys and all these wonderful things that we want to do, but I just found it extremely alarming to hear you say that we need national standards in order to reduce line-of-duty deaths. And I would like to know from you specifically, what are the obstacles precluding us from establishing these standards, to your knowledge? That was a mouthful from your youngest member of Congress. Not youngest, newest, I should say.
Chair Wu, Congresswoman Richardson, I think what we need to do, and like I mentioned in my testimonies, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We do have standards and consensus-based standards at that we largely go with respect to the NFPA. Unfortunately, not every state follows NFPA guidelines. You have a mishmash of standards that are based at the local level. While I believe law enforcement has minimum standards for a law enforcement officer here in the United States, it's really at the local level and the state level with respect for national standards. We strongly believe that consensus standards, not reinventing the wheel, using NFPA, whether it's firefighter 1 standards, company officer standards, staffing standards, those kind of things, will have a direct impact on the amount of lives that we save in the fire service. We think it's long overdue now in the 21st century that the fire service needs the federal government to take a lead role with respect to that. The bottom-up role has not worked.
So then I think that would be leading to our administrator. Why have we failed to establish these standards?
Well, at the United States Fire Administration level, we have been asked very recently to participate in the next generation of upgrades that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is putting out. The OSHA standards 1910-156 are currently out for updating, and part of the conversation that we're having right now with OSHA from the USFA standpoint is the incorporation of the latest standards. The OSHA standards as they are written today were written 31 years ago, I believe is the correct. So they haven't been updated since then. Obviously, there's been a lot of consensus standards developed around firefighter safety, minimum standards and certification that have been done. So OSHA has opened it back up. Actually, September 11th was when it was published in the Federal Register. We have not submitted our comments yet, but we are putting them together, and we'll submit them for consideration by OSHA. Hopefully what they're going to do is bring in the rest of the national standards. That will at least give states and localities something to specifically look at when they're trying to develop standards. But even with that, there's still the opportunity at the state level for them to either modify the OSHA standards or accept them in whole, and it varies state by state how that's done.
So could you provide to this committee your timeline or how you would anticipate we'd be able to?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentlelady, and we go to a second round of questions. The chair recognizes himself. Captain Livingston, I wanted to give you an opportunity to expand on your previous answer. It's my understanding that the number of fatalities for firefighters this year has already reached the annual average, and we have 3 more months to go. What are some of the things that we can do to reduce the fatality rate, and what kind of leadership role can USFA or any of the other agencies present, what leadership roles can they play to reduce this high fatality rate?
Chairman Wu, I think what we need to do is we do have an advocate in the USFA. They can be the point agency within the federal government to not only start us on the road of national standards, but also to address some of the needs that we have. I think that if you were to, and I think Dr. Hall would reinforce this, I think if you were to look over the last 30 years of the firefighter fatalities, 3 common issues come to play. One, it was a lack of communications on the fire ground that occurred that led in some form or fashion of why that death occurred. 2, there was a breakdown in the command and control of the incident. And then 3, simply staffing issues. We try to do too much with too less of personnel. And so I think those 3 areas that I've discussed, as well as my written and oral testimony, going down the lines of some uniformity towards national standards will certainly help with that. Along with the standards, though, we need to emphasize training. We are asked, you ask a lot of the fire service, our nation asks a lot of the fire service. We need to be able to be properly trained, and it's a challenge right now. We need to find ways to have our people continue to be well trained.
Thank you. Dr. Hall.
The majority of firefighter on-duty deaths each year don't occur at the fire ground. And so if you were thinking of steps that you particularly want to take, the common theme in well over half of the firefighter deaths each year is either a heart attack or some kind of vehicle handling error. Now, you can address both of these through standards, through training, through a variety of measures, but they aren't the usual kind of, we should have a new type of equipment, we should have a training in this kind of technical task. So what we have run into, as Captain Livingston has said several times, is a lack of people adopting and complying with the standards that already exist. In this country, we don't have nationally binding standards for the most part. We've gotten more involved in this through OSHA, as Chief Cade has said, and that gives us certain opportunities. But for many other things, what we have to do is persuade and recruit the fire departments, persuade them of the importance, recruit them to following the standards. And that is a much more painstaking task.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Cade, what capabilities would your agency like to add to NVFC? And also in your testimony, you noted that the current system only captures about half of the incidents that occur annually. What makes the reporting system limited in this fashion? And could you also address the complaints about timeliness that have been brought up today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think fundamentally one of the issues with the National Incident Reporting System has just been the time that it takes in the process, going from a paper process. At some point, someone has to enter that data into a computer system, and doing that whole editing iteration. The data belongs to the local fire service, and it also belongs to the state. So it takes a little while for it to come through to us at the USFA in the data center. As Congressman Gingrey correctly points out, part of the dilemma with making any of the changes that we're looking at is trying to ensure that we don't get caught up in the technology end of things and that we forget the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And the goal for us is to be able to have the information available to the fire service to be able to make the decisions that they need to make at the local level. Right now, we do, I think, a very good job of providing the long-term capability of doing the data analysis for the studies. We do some very important work with a lot of our partners. It's not just the National Fire data that we're using. We're using information from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, from NFPA. There's a bunch of different arenas that are providing that information to us. We're trying to look at making it a web-based system, not so much so that we can get the information to us just alone faster, but also be able to allow people to get in and search the database and use it in an easier manner than what it is today. It's not user friendly, and one of my goals is to try and make it user friendly for a fire chief.
My time has expired, but Dr. Hall, I would expect that you would have some comment on this also.
From the very beginning of NFIRS, we have never been in a position where all of the states were participating in NFIRS, and the USFA really has no legal authority or strong measures that it can use to compel states to participate. Few states have all of their communities participating when the state participates, and some communities in some states go in and out of participation. So we are not in a position to be able to jump to a 100% census system, and I think it's helpful to compare us to other systems out there. There are really only 2 countries in the world that have anything remotely close to what we have in our ability to track accurately and with some detail the fire experience, and those are the United Kingdom and Japan. Canada used to, but their system, which was about like ours, fell apart because of a lack of close coordination at the national level. Over at the FBI, where they track crimes and participation is mandatory, they still don't get everything in, and they don't necessarily have a well-defined procedure for projecting from what they do get to what they report. But the best example is probably the death certificate database, where it is completely mandatory, everything comes in, and yet if you go in and find out what's the latest data you've got available, you'll quite often find that it's older than the NFIRS data that's out. A certain degree of realism about what's achievable, and also an awareness of what the system is trying to do to get a representative but detailed sample that is a valid sample, and to analyze it in valid ways, and then go on from those multiple objectives to what you can and what you can't accomplish with certain kind of technology upgrades. That, I think, is the way to go, and I know and deeply respect the professionals at the USFA who are in charge of ENFRS. I know that if you give them the mandate to do the best job they can with the funds available, you will get the best job that anyone can do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hall. The gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. With all of my Republican colleagues tied up at other hearings and markups, I'm getting this opportunity to be in a catbird seat. At the end of this hearing, I'm probably going to be the resident Republican expert on fire issues now that Kurt Weldon, my friend from Pennsylvania, is no longer with us. So this is indeed, Mr. Chairman, a unique opportunity for me. I want to go to Chief Henderson in regard to the issue of the residential sprinklers. And Chief, you mentioned in my own county of Cobb a requirement. And of course, Dr. Sunder addressed just a little bit a recent study of the cost analysis of requiring residential sprinkler systems. It's sort of like, isn't it, the requirement of, or thinking of the requirement of having seat belts in our public school buses in every seat. And we don't have that by any stretch of the imagination. So I would like, Chief Henderson, you to start, maybe Dr. Sunder to weigh in, and the others, if there's time remaining, to discuss this issue a little bit further in regard to cost effectiveness.
With regards to like cost per household of installing a residential sprinkler system, and it would vary depending on the state and depending on the labor costs and things. But I think in Cobb County the cost is somewhere around, in a new structure, is around $20.50 and $2 a square foot. I think to go back and retrofit it is somewhere up to $5 a square foot to put those sprinkler systems in. Okay.
That would equate, Chief, to $10,000 expense on a 2,000 square foot home for retrofitting.
For retrofitting, yeah.
Pretty expensive item for us.
That's one problem that you always have when you start talking about residential sprinklers, is simply because the mortgage lenders, contractors, insurance companies, people of that nature are the people that actually fight those kind of laws. But when you look on the other hand, the lives that are saved, I think nationwide, and Dr. Sunder might be able to give me a little help with the statistics, but I think nationwide it's about, there's something like 80% fewer deaths in sprinkled areas. Scottsdale, Arizona, I think, has one of the longest communities that has had sprinkler systems. There's been in place for 20, 25 years, something like that. It would save lives of the people in the community. It would save lives of the firefighters. And there's another problem with that, and that's the rule of eminent domain, just like smoke detectors. Now, in the state of Georgia, we have a law that requires everybody to have a smoke detector. You can actually fine them $25 if they don't have a smoke detector. The only problem is no one can go in the house unless they have an emergency or unless they're invited in, check to see if they've got them. It would be the same thing with residential sprinklers.
And a $25 fine is not too much distance.
Not much. But you know that is a problem when you pass those kind of laws without looking at that kind of at the rule of eminent domain, because that is that person's house, and you have to be invited in or brought in an emergency.
Chief, that's a great point. Dr. Sunder?
I'd just like to make two separate points. One regarding the benefit cost analysis, what we've done. We've looked at three kinds of homes, colonial, townhouse, and ranch homes. And we've looked at the installation of a minimum kind of sprinkler system, bare bones, with existing plumbing in a new construction. It's about anywhere from about $1,000 to $2,000, roughly speaking. The colonial is a little bit more expensive than, let's say, a ranch. The benefits, when you think about the fatalities averted, the injuries averted, the uninsured property loss averted, and indirect costs averted, and so forth, insurance credit, the benefits are about $5,000 a piece for all of those kinds of houses. So the benefit to cost in that situation is somewhere between 2 and 5, somewhere in that order. The other point, of course, is when you start putting more fancy systems in place, the costs go up. And of course, retrofit is a whole different proposition. That's always is the biggest issue in anything we do with building codes. Now, having said that, the question is how do we get these changes into building codes? We have in our country a system where it's a voluntary consensus system, and we have a system where different interested parties weigh in on the building code process. Particularly at the national level, you have the International Code Council and NFPA that have model codes. For this discussion, I'll use ICC, the International Code Council, as an example. It's used in a number of the states statewide. And the democratic process you have there gets the private sector involved, the insurance involved, the home builders involved, and then the fire service. It's always an issue of convincing, having enough votes to get your proposal passed. And in the last cycle, in fact, I was there at that time, they didn't make it. There was a proposal to include residential fire sprinklers in, and they didn't make it. My guess is with these new studies and more conviction on the cost issues, it might come to pass in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Gingrey. And there being no further questions from the panel present, before I bring the hearing to a close, I'd like to thank our witnesses for coming, in many instances, long distances to testify in your very thoughtful testimony before the subcommittee today. The record will remain open for additional statements from the members and for questions and answers and any follow-up questions the committee may ask of the witnesses. The witnesses are now excused and the hearing is adjourned.